Hello and welcome to the Front Row Back Row podcast. I am your host, Dr. Owen Campbell, owner of Simplify Motion Physical Therapy in Phoenix, Arizona. And with me, as always, is Dr. Brian Wolf, owner of Evolution Physical Therapy in Connecticut and Long Island. How are we doing today, Brian?
I'm good, man. How are you? How we doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I think my mic levels are okay now, so we're not going to be blowing out any eardrums on the ride to work.
Nice. We'll find out if I'm destroying people too. We'll find out.
There you go. So today, the topic that we're going to cover are 5 ways to make more money in physical therapy. Um, Ways that you can kind of manipulate different levers in your business to be able to get more than just, hi, Mr. Insurance Company, please pay me money for these 4 units. Diversifying some of these other things that I know you guys have done a really good job of at Evolution. Um, I haven't quite had the chance to do that starting up my own mobile practice, but I'm sure I'll get there.
Yeah, for sure. No, this is the fun part.
Yeah.
Making more
So
money.
the first one that I look at, and it probably will be my first lever that I can pull once I start getting more of a full schedule, is your pricing structure, right? And that's always the topic on everyone's mind. How much should I charge? How much am I worth? Should I stick to this price? Should I go low to get more customers or more patients or more clients, and then build myself up, right? Or should I start high? Right? Should I just be a premium service and just suffer through maybe a lot of no's because the yeses are so more valuable? So like I want to kind of dive into this a little bit. Um, just any advice you have for me? I know I've kind of gone the Netflix route where you're a big value at a low price, try and build up your amount of clients, but I'm sure there's other good options out there too.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We definitely went lower and then came up,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, I mean, obviously, everybody knows now we're insurance-based practice, so we're always asking for raises in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like probably half our practice, if not more, is some sort of cash-based service.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the answer, quite frankly, is a little bit in the middle. So it's like
Okay.
you don't want to be the most expensive, but you certainly don't want to be the cheapest, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And so I think there are different tiers as well within that options. So
Okay.
we'll talk about a bunch of different levels people can pull, but I think in terms of the first lever, mainly what you charge and what you're giving away for that charge is important.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what's your and again, this is I guess let's chat kind of more about like the cash value of something like that. Like I think of it from
Yep.
like a personal training. Like we do personal training, so that's $100 an hour for a personal trainer.
Mm-hmm.
So what would a physical therapist charge for that? Would it be around
Yeah.
125, 130, 150?
So.
Realize though that while people will say, "Hey, I'm a physical therapist," look at all my training
Mm-hmm.
in comparison to what it is, you're competing against people like myself who take insurance. So the
Yep.
reality is that's the disadvantage that cash PTs have is in theory, someone if you're having that pricing structure, realize that it has nothing to do with what your schooling is. That's very important.
Yep.
A mistake that people will make and when they open a cash-based practice, they'll say, "Look at all the schooling that I have." And people don't really
Mm-hmm.
care about that. That has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
It's the value you provide. It's why you see
Yeah.
tons of personal trainers and chiropractors and acupuncturists and massage therapists able to charge a lot more money because they're
Mm-hmm.
really, really like offering a ton more value. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
that's where physical therapists need to realize whether they're insurance based or cash based. You just need to look at how to provide more value. And that's something you can,
Yeah.
leverage.
And I think it's important too. I've changed my prices probably 3 times already in 6 months, right?
Great.
You have to be flexible. You have to take some feedback and say, okay, maybe I'll tweak this, maybe I'll tweak that, because it's all market dependent, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm in one neighborhood of Phoenix, it's a lot different tolerance to my price point than other neighborhoods would be. And in some, I'm the cheapest option available. So I think it's important to constantly be flexible about that, especially when you're first starting out.
Yeah, yeah. I think it also, the one disadvantage to being a mobile PT practice versus
Mm-hmm.
having a location is every mobile PT practice will eventually create some sort of affiliation. I know you did with a gym or like something along
Mm-hmm.
those lines. And then you get stuck with the fact of like, I'm charging the same amount of money to have someone for me to go to your house versus you come to me. And then you're
Mm-hmm.
stuck in this conundrum of like, what do I do now? Like, because if I bring the
Mm-hmm.
person to come to my place, then if they're used to me treating them at their home, so how do I raise that rate and where do I do that? So that structure and that pricing is also really important too.
Yeah.
But kind of go back to what you said, you know, I think to go and the fact that you've raised your prices multiple times is totally fine, you know, and especially in
Actually,
the
no.
beginning.
So I actually lowered it. So I started pretty
Oh,
high,
interesting.
because I have a friend who has been doing this, and he started, for full transparency, he started about 250 an hour,
Yep.
but he was, 5 years less experience than me, like all the stuff that you were talking about, where I was like, oh, well, look at me, look at my resume, and then I wasn't getting that because people are like, who are you? What are you
Yep.
doing? He'd been in business for 3 or 4 years, so he could do that, right? And he
Yeah.
raised to that point. So I started saying, okay, a little bit of humble pie. Let's go down. Let's get some people knowing who I am, and then the hope is to build it back up.
Exactly. That's the reality of any of that stuff, and we found it with our fitness business. Is what we've just done is as we've gotten more and more notoriety, we've just raised the prices, right?
Yeah.
And eventually, you get to a point where you're either at capacity and you can't take any more people on, or you keep raising your prices. You know what I mean? Like that's the idea behind it.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing would be for cash physical therapy. The same thing would be for any of those things. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's something that I've thought about for me personally. Have been like, okay, like you know, me treating patients, maybe what I do is eventually move to kind of like this, what some of the HSS does with their physicians is there's some physicians with
Hospital special
HSS.
surgery
Yep,
in
yep.
New
That
York.
just
Yeah.
don't take insurance, right? And so what
Yep.
happens for them is they'll be like, we just don't take insurance. Yeah, we'll go. Your insurance will cover the hospital and all that stuff, but like we're not taking
Mm-hmm.
your insurance. And so I've thought
Yeah.
about that for me personally within the practice, but that
Mm-hmm.
also gets into some hairy stuff. So, nevertheless,
Yeah.
there's tons of other different options.
Or even different price points. There's a place around us. The owner, he's 190 an hour, but the person he hired is 160.
Yep, we do that
So
in our
that,
Colorado offices. Exactly,
yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Okay, so then now we've talked about, okay, how much each body in the door, right, will give you, or each hour that you provide service. Now, how do I get more of those hours? How
Yes,
do I get more people? That's where I'm at now. I need more butts in the seats.
yeah.
So what are some of the things? I know we talk about this a lot with marketing and all that stuff, but I think this is a lever that people always know they need to pull. But I don't think they understand how much work it takes to keep that
Yes,
lever pulled.
yeah.
So I know it's an obvious topic, but any thoughts on that? Things that you can like kind of share with me, me,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
also our
yeah.
listeners, but mostly me.
Yeah, I think look, the reality of to make more money. And again, when I originally thought about this topic too, this is also for the physical therapist listening to this who, you know, maybe working for somebody else and is trying to figure out how they can ask for a raise, because I think that's a big one for
Yeah.
me. Is, you know, when I look at, you know, we're not a big productivity clinic, but when someone asks for a raise, especially in this climate now where people are looking to make more money, particularly physical therapists, because of inflation and everything that's going on in the economy, the reality is you need to be seeing more patients or clients. And I don't mean that in a capacity like we treat patients every 40 minutes, right? So because we treat patients every 40 minutes, I don't need someone to be like, I'm going to see patients every 15 minutes and give crap care, like bad quality care, and do that. What I mean by that, if you're looking for a raise within a clinic and you're looking to make more money, you know, working for me, if you're going out and doing things that are bringing in clients, and those clients you're so booked that they can't see you, but they're seeing other physical therapists in our organization, that's a really really lucrative offer, because I think
Mhm.
from that perspective, now you're helping me in building the business, right? And then we're in this together, and so I want to invest in you because you've
Yeah.
invested in yourself and in your brand. You know what I mean?
Well,
So that's one. But
and this is one of the things. I actually just heard this. I want to put this in. There's a clinic owner that would reimburse, or would actually put as part of his hourly rate of making Instagram videos and building
yeah,
that community for his staff. Some people, they don't want to do it, but he had a motivated staff and he did it. That's a great way to, they could build themselves up and the clinic.
yeah, we talked a little bit about workshops, right? Like, and that's
Mm,
what I'm working on with one of my therapists, is like how to create really cool workshops. And, you know, if those things start generating quite a bit of revenue, you know, and notoriety within our business, right?
mm,
There's no doubt in my mind I'm going to pay her for that, right? A lot of
mm,
money for that, right? For,
yeah,
if she's again, depending on how much money that's bringing in, then we'll share those wins, right? And vice versa.
yeah,
This isn't just like a, you know, we're understanding she's going outside the scope of what we hired her to do. So that's
yeah,
one. So that's one thing. So to increase patients, I mean, it's marketing, right? The simple stuff is networking, referrals, right? So word of mouth,
mm,
workshops. doing stuff online. So going on Google and Yelp and website stuff and SEO and email, right? Doing those kind of things. So,
Mm-hmm.
social media, so Facebook, IG, YouTube, LinkedIn, TikTok, and then of course going into paid ads. And so when I think
Mm-hmm.
of, the business owner, getting really good at paid advertising, I think is a priority you want to focus on initially, right? Like
Yeah.
making enough money, setting it aside. We've talked a lot about like cost of acquiring customer, understanding how that works, and then really diving into paid advertising and just saying like, I got this specific amount of money that is going to go, to Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, that kind of stuff, and that's what you're looking to do, right? And
Yeah.
so, sorry, there you go. There's that fire truck I was telling you about
I
before,
was
right?
gonna say,
There it is. There it is.
yeah.
So excuse us all on the podcast, but essentially what ends up happening is, that's where I would focus my attention,
Mhm.
is how to figure out paid advertising on the Facebook, Instagram and YouTube perspective, but also leverage the networking, those referrals, word of mouths, and then workshops. So things that don't really cost you that much money, because that's how you can offset, the cost of acquiring a customer, is like doing the boots on the ground stuff. And that's where, like, as an employee, that's the why. Because if
Mhm.
I'm spending all this money as a business owner on paid advertising and we're getting butts in the door and that's awesome, people are treating patients, the best thing that employees can do is boots on the ground marketing. So, that kind of stuff where it's workshops, networking stuff, and then also increasing, referrals through word of mouth and accelerating that process, that doesn't cost me anything. It's only pure profit. So what
Yeah.
I'm going to do with that pure profit is I'm going to hand that physical therapist the cost of acquiring the customers. So
Mhm.
like, again, if my cost of acquiring a customer is, it's simple math. If it's going to be $150 and you
Mhm.
bring in 10 new customers because of some networking thing you did, I'm going to cut you a check for $1,500,
Yeah.
right? So like, think, you know what I mean? Like, that's the difference, is like, people need to understand how that math works. It's like when people
Yeah.
say, "Hey, I just want to," a lot of people want to do work for, want to get paid to do the work, and it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, that doesn't always work that way. You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
should be kind of this. That's what this quote unquote entitlement culture comes from, right? When people are like,
Well,
I got to pay him to do the work. It's like, yeah, you got to prove it.
yeah, and I think you hit on a few points there that I just want to go back and highlight. Anybody listening to this who is not about to start a business or has a business or is at a growth phase of their business, just anyone who's a staff PT, you should be having these conversations in your interview, right? You have no idea if Evolution Physical Therapy in Connecticut or Joe Schmo Physical Therapy in Connecticut will do this, but you probably have applications into both places. So these are some pretty important questions that you should have. And then for on the other side of the table as the hiring manager, you want to make sure that you're asking questions that may bring this out of somebody. Just some food for thought from my corporate days. We had a company that was one very much towards this, and then another that wasn't. And you could definitely see the interview would change just based on how much we valued it.
And it's funny, man, because I think, had they reward you with those types of structures, I feel like you would have been that person, right? Like
Oh,
you were,
100%.
right? Like, because the thought process is, we were talking, doing some quick math, and we were like, these workshops, we're going to charge about $100 a head,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's 15 people that come, that's $1,500. But
Mm-hmm.
there was a point where we were talking like, there's some workshops out there that are like 6 hour workshops, 2 days a week. They're like
Mm-hmm.
$850.
Yeah.
Well, start doing the math, right?
Yeah.
$850, right? Say there's 10 people in it, that's $8,500
Yeah.
times 6 days a week, 6 times like a year. So for
Mm-hmm.
6 weekends,
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to do that for me, like, we're going to figure out some sort of rev split, some sort of rent situation. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not, especially, it's all come down to how much of my work it has to be. If I don't have to do
Yeah.
anything, guess what? Like, then, like, I'll be charge you rent for what we're doing, and like, you take the money. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there's not going to be there's going to be a significant split on the employee side. So I think people just
Yeah.
need to be creative and create more value versus just pay me more money to do the same job that you're paying me less money for. Because I can tell you the reality is that that's why so many people are young new grads going into outpatient clinics,
Mm.
because they're less expensive. They're
Yeah.
just, it's that simple. Like, you're when I got to pay somebody almost $100,000 to the same job I could pay somebody 75, like,
Mm-hmm.
and no one's going to bring more value. And quite frankly, I can mold the young person.
Yeah.
They're not tainted by some like other stuff. Like,
Yeah.
it's going to matter, right? So there's just a lot more around that person that I think is kind of essential.
And that leads me into another thing. You talk about molding, and sometimes molding is really good, right? But other times molding can be really bad, where you're molding that person to be a traffic director, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's see, four people in an hour, you have two techs, you got to make sure they're doing it. So that is kind of the quintessential, decrease time with patients, increase revenue because you get to see more people, right? But I think it's also important that you can also make more money as a physical therapy owner and do it ethically if you're making sure that you're condensing time a little bit because you may need to. There might be staffing challenges, but you're doing it in the right way,
Yeah.
right? So maybe don't have them ride the bike, right? Where you're, that's part of your schedule or some of these other kind of ancillary things. But I think that decreasing time with patients kind of has to be done, right? In terms of growing a business, but there's ways to do it. Right.
Yeah.
So you talked about 40-minute sessions, and that's, I mean, I'm giving hour sessions in a mobile thing. So how did you guys land on the 40-minute mark?
So here's a great here's a great way to look at this, right? So when you think about 40 minutes versus 45 minutes, 40 minutes
Mm-hmm.
is literally 12 patients in an 8-hour day.
Mm-hmm.
45 is 10. That simple.
Wow.
So when you think about the math, you're like, holy crap, that's just easy money, right? In terms of the math and the way that works. Because 2 patients a day might not sound like a lot, but obviously right now, Owen, I know that sounds like a lot to you when you're
Yep.
hustling. And
Oh
so
yeah.
when you start thinking about it, that's the difference between 50 patients a week versus 60 patients a week.
Yeah.
That's the difference of 520 patient visits a year per PT.
Oh,
So you talk four
yeah.
PTs, you're over 2,000 visits by five
Yeah.
minutes, right? So
Yeah.
most PTs are pretty good on that. The bigger jump is then the hour and half hour. So that's
Okay.
when you start to get in person. I think everybody who's a physical therapist who's worked in that model knows that there's not great scenarios where you're not being 2-on-1 where you're seeing multiple patients, and I think that's where the value begins to decrease.
Mm-hmm.
Is at that point. Now, if you're an insurance-based clinic and your reimbursement rates are not particularly good and you don't have a choice, like I would suggest doing every 30 minutes and only keep the person there for 30 minutes. Like I would
Yeah.
I would suggest that because
So one-on-one, but 30 minutes.
I think so, man, because I think that you just decrease the value of our profession
Mm-hmm.
by overlapping people. I just over time I've just noticed this over and over again. So I think even
Yeah.
cash PTs could get away with a half hour, for cash. Because in
Yeah.
theory, here's the way the math works. So say my price is so oh, do you mind me asking what you charge right now? Or I can throw out a
I,
number.
I charge 150. I
Okay.
have a $25 if I have to go more than 30 minutes.
Okay. So 150 an hour, right? So
Mm-hmm.
150 an hour and I see you or
Mm-hmm.
you see me. So basically what you can do is if you go from a standpoint, oh, I lost my camera here. If you go to a standpoint where um you're sorry, you might be having a faceless for the rest of the time.
No, it's
In
okay.
terms there you go. I'm gonna be
Your
more visual
profile
for you
picture
here.
is fantastic.
There you
Yeah.
go, exactly. So if you're at 150 per hour
Yeah.
and instead say you have a couple and the couple is like, can you do us both an hour, half hour and a half hour? What it
Yeah.
would be is you would basically be like, okay, like I'll do it for $85. And
Yeah.
now you just increase your price because at
Mm-hmm.
$85, you're now charging 170 an hour.
Yeah.
So that obviously is a bit of a challenge in that conversation because that couple's going to say, well, Owen, why wouldn't you just charge us 150? Right.
Yeah.
And maybe you make a break for that because it's the two of them. But the
Yeah.
reality is like there's hear me now.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. We resume the recording, Brian. There's a little technical
I was
difficulties
doing
on
my
that
thing.
side.
Some of that. So anyway, I think the idea behind decreasing your time with patients is basically that you can lower, your amount of money that you're spending, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you also, in theory, if I'm treating 16 patients a day, 12 patients a day, 10 patients a day, 8 patients a day, the less patients I treat, the more money I need to make on those patients.
Yeah.
And so if you're decreasing the amount of time, and there's a sweet spot where,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, at 40 minutes we charge 115. So to your point, we're charging about 150 an hour.
Yeah.
But I can see, whereas you're like an 8-hour day or a 10-hour day, an 8-hour day, you can do 8 patients. I can do
Yeah.
12. So in theory, I can
Yeah.
serve more people.
Yeah.
So there's an argument that says, and then what I can do to raise prices instead of it being 150, you have to raise prices to $200, whereas I got to raise prices basically to 150. And
Yeah.
so now suddenly that's the issue is, well, Owen's $200 but Brian's 150, and so that's a point that I've realized the model, in 40 minutes is plenty of time. I think it's
Yeah.
it's a good amount of time where
Oh
you
yeah.
can work with different people, right?
Yeah.
So that's more the thought process.
I agree, and I think that that's the hard part is everybody is doing one-on-one for 1 hour sessions. Like
Yes.
literally every mobile therapist, and even honestly, big box places are saying you get 1 hour with the therapist. Well, you and three others, but
Yeah.
and so I think that I honestly, I've gotten good results from the guy who comes in and says, dude, I got to go in like 40 minutes, 50 minutes, half an hour. Can you get me in? I'll still get good results. You got to have confidence in your ability to treat somebody that way. But I think that 40 is a really good spot for a lot of different experience levels to still be able to get that good result.
Yeah, I totally agree.
But even still, it has to work for your practice, right? So for you
Yeah.
guys, the way that you educate your people, the way you bring your people in, that works for you. If you're in an area where there's not many PTs and you don't really trust that you're going to hire a new grad who's going to be able to do that, you got to think value first, right? So, with the disclaimer of do what's right for you, but this is what Brian. So, and you may hear now only me because apparently Brian's Wi-Fi cut out. But some of the things that we did want to go over, the last few points. The number 4 reason was that we want to group clients together. One of the main things that fitness classes do really well is that they will get 6 or 7 people paying 10, $15 a class, and they'll get them all into one. And for 1 hour of that group, or 1 hour of that personal trainer's time, they can make a lot more than they may make in a personal training session. Also, it's a lot more accessible, right? So people are much more willing to pay 10, 15, $20 a class than $100, 150 for an hour. So it allows you to work with more people. Now, we're not personal trainers in the physical therapy world, so we have to make sure that we kind of look at ways that you can group patients together that are ethical, that will provide them benefit. Obviously, you need people to kind of understand a little bit that you'll be talking about different health conditions, so you have to have the right type of people. But if you have a specific niche, if you have a group of people that are in kind of that same pretty active but not all the way out of pain yet type of orthopedic area, this could be a really good way of kind of making sure that there's compliance near the end of the training when it's mostly a lot of just strengthening, power, flexibility, while under your guidance. So the class can't be 20 people, right? At least I wouldn't be comfortable with 20 people. And these are ways that you can take that 1 hour of time, but maybe see either more people if you're really busy by giving them a more medically or more physical therapy focused fitness class, and in a smaller group setting to be able to increase how much you might get out of an hour of your time. It will require you getting some special skills, right? Like you have to be personable, you have to be able to manage people at a different time. But this is why I talk about selection. You wouldn't be doing this with someone who just started with back pain or who just had some issue with falls and this is their second or third appointment. This would not be an appropriate person. But it could be someone, say, who is just a little bit sore in their overhead press, right? They can overhead press, but they got that pain that doesn't get them over the next bar. You can do a shoulder group, right? You can do a back pain group. You can do some of these others where they're more towards the end of their plan of care. And the last one is that I thought is a really great idea, and it can be both for a mobile practice and for a brick and mortar practice, is to offer different services. Now, this really focuses mostly on the insurance taking client companies, right? So this is where you will have the people that come into an insurance based client company will kind of come in, they will have their copay, they will have cost per visit and all that, but maybe dry needling isn't covered, or maybe those cryo boots aren't covered, or cupping isn't covered. Some things that we know clients and patients really want, we know that it can help them through their journey, but the insurance says nah, we're not paying for it. Those can be other services that you can offer on a cash basis, and you can market on a cash basis. Things like manual stretching, right, versus just giving them a home program with a stretch strap. All of these different things, depending on your clientele, can be reasons and areas that you might be able to build up some more income that isn't just please negotiating like an insurance contract. So with that, I think it's important to kind of go over the top 5 things that we've been talking about. We can increase or play with the pricing model. We can increase patients and clients so we can get more people in through the door. Also, you can decrease the time, but you got to do it that fits your values. Decreasing time with patients will obviously increase the amount of patients that you can get and can provide an advantage financially, but the value of what you provide is what is going to keep you in business. So you got to make sure you're doing that well. Grouping clients together is a good way of taking people who are appropriate for physical therapy at a more of a return to sport, return to work level, and getting them all in one place at one time, and maybe making more off of that hour of your time versus if it was a one-on-one. And then finally, looking at a la carte services that you could do. So with that, I'll close out this podcast. I hope when Brian listens back to it,
I'm
he
actually, I think
approves.
I'm back now, so I can
Oh, he's
jump into
back.
it.
All
Yeah, he
right.
is, he is. So just to help, yeah, no, sorry guys, I had some Wi-Fi stuff. In terms of that, just to sum it up, I agree with what Owen said. I mean, that's a lot of why we also do fitness. So it aligns with our core values and realizing what aligns with us. And so I think if you're doing that and aligning something that's with your core values as you're developing your practice, that's where fitness is our cash-based service that we really provide, and allows physical therapists to slide into that also. I would also put it as, make sure to also think about services that people are used to paying cash for if you're an insurance-based practice. So Owen had mentioned, dry needling and cryo boots and recovery services, fitness services. These are all things that services are all things that people are used to paying out of pocket for. So if you're like, we offer these different services on these different times, you just want to try and separate, if you're insurance based, separate what you're doing to allow basically your ability to move in and out of that model seamlessly. Whenever you stop simplifying things for patients and involve money, that's when people get weird about it. So I think it's,
Yeah.
realizing it's a different sales pitch, but I think those are awesome. What you just talked about with your core values, I think is tremendous. So good stuff.
Good, good. Well, with that, we will end today's recording after the final cameo by Brian here. Um, good to have you back, bud.
Thanks, man.
Uh, and we got some cool things coming down the pike. Not quite ready to roll it out yet, but you will be hearing from us. As always, we are on YouTube, we are on Apple Podcasts, we are on Spotify. Please give us a review. It boosts us up the rankings. We have been seeing almost double-digit followers across all platforms, so this is
Nice.
good.
All right.
Make sure you comment. YouTube comment section is fantastic. You can always reach out to us, hopefully pick our brains and get some good advice. So with that, Brian, I got nothing more to add. You got anything?
No, man. As Owen said, we're kind of working on a digital community that we can try and bring some people together and give some more value and advice. So hopefully that's something in the future to tease along. So if you're interested, please comment on any of our platforms on some certain things you'd like to hear. Then we'd love to produce it and do it for you.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, with that, have a good day, man.
You too, buddy. See ya.
See ya.